So I just played a game against Violin. I'm playing as white. They are playing as black. So I open with e4. They play d6, g3, uh, f6, c3. So this is a pretty standard opening, I believe. Both of us sort of just controlling the center. Um, developing our knights. It's pretty simple stuff. I develop my bishop. I usually like to control this square, if at all possible. They push their pawn forward to control more center. It's a pretty basic opening. I decided to close the position off. I think that in the future, in this position, I'll probably just either push h3. I'm not sure why I'll do that. I guess to stop the knight from coming around. I could have castled, or a4, and basically I believe that's just taking up some empty space. But instead I closed the position. I'd considered trading, but I calculated that at the end of the trade, we would reach this position. I had thought about it for a bit. It's just a pretty even position. I thought there was benefit in closing the position off. I'd hoped to stop his knights from being able to really do too much, kind of stop his development. But he did the best move I think possible, which was challenge that. In which case I took the piece, he took back. So far it's all pretty basic openings. I imagine this has been played quite a bit. I'm still controlling this center here, which is good. That's what I wanted to do. Sort of my pretty much like the opening I like to play, or the one that I really know how to play at my current level. So I decided at this point just to castle. So that was actually the most recommended move. He plays a prophylactic move, stops my bishop from coming to this position here. I played b4. Basically, I just wanted to claim some space. I thought I would sort of challenge this center he has here. He's controlling these squares. I thought if he pushes his square forwards and I'll take that, he would take that, and there'll be a bit of gaps in his defense. There are gaps in my defense. His king is out in the open, and I had castled. So that was my thought process. I'm not saying it's correct or incorrect, but I figured I'd explain it anyway. So he challenged that pawn. It's not being defended. Why not? Free tempo for the castle. Something I didn't think about. I decided to defend it with the pawn. Which was the third best decision. Apparently, it would either be best with the rook or with the bishop. I considered both those options. If I played the bishop, I would be afraid that I would just box the bishop in. Mind you, I could really push this with tempo. It's being guarded by my bishop and knight. And then the rook. But I didn't want to really leave this pawn on a2 undefended. Well, it was still defended by the knight, I guess. But this knight isn't really being protected by any pieces, so I figured it could easily move. In which case, if my castle's here in the future, then this pawn could just be undefended. But I guess my thought process was a bit incorrect there. So yeah, I pushed the pawn forwards to defend it. He challenges this pawn, which was the right thing to do. I guess I'd claimed a fair bit of space here. He challenged the pawn. I took his pawn. I took his pawn. He took his pawn back with the knight, which I believe was the optimal position. So so far we've a pretty closed off game. I should have perhaps played this move here. Did I do that in the game? I don't think so. It would have been a good outlet for the knight, but I guess it could just get really questioned pretty easily. So what did I play? I developed my bishop. I guess on c1 it wasn't doing much. Now he decided to take that pawn. At this rate, I took back with my knight. He took back with his knight. And now here I have a plus 2.36 advantage. I'm not sure how. The position seems pretty even. I'm not sure where exactly my advantage even is. I guess maybe I should have. What does it recommend here? Queen to d5. Oh, okay, yeah. To centralize the queen and connect the rooks. That's actually what I did. It's not really, but it's what I'll do next move. But this move here is very weak. I'm not too sure why. I guess you can. I just want to put pressure on the knight for it to move, and I didn't want to move my bishop out of a position it was. I wanted to develop my queen. He guards the knight, which is to be pretty expected. And then I played queen to d5. However, now it's a negative 2.7 position. When had I played it now, it would be a positive 2.7 position. So I'm not too sure why. I guess the only difference between my position before and my position now is that this bishop's here. No, that'd be plus 11, but so I guess that really just went over my head. I'm still not too sure why that's so much of an advantage. I guess being in this position, I have these lines, as well as I'm still attacking this knight. But anyway, he protects it with a bishop, and then I do actually centralize my queen. This is a losing position, and the ideal position would be this to, I guess, challenge the knight this way. I'm not too sure why it's... Okay, so it's actually an even position. Oh, yeah, sorry, I'm going to move my queen, and now it's a losing position. I'm not too sure why. He protects it with his castle. And now I actually missed out on checkmate. Not check. I missed out on essentially grabbing his queen. Not this move. This here. So this was my opportunity to essentially win the game. What did I play? I played bishop, because I've been watching this pawn for a while, so in my mind it was I wanted to take it before he really got to develop it, because my thought process was I have castles here, an open file, active bishops, and if I can obtain that pawn there, then I'll have a white pawn here that can just turn into a queen. So that was my thought process. But essentially, I'll show you the sequence that the bot recommends. So first, queen to c6. So this is check. Now, if they block with the bishop, which is actually the best move, so bishop to d7, then I can essentially just get the knight for free. It's a plus 6.45 advantage. And that's a pretty good positioning for my pieces too. Because because that knight was extremely strong. Had they blocked with their queen, then I would take here, and then they really about have one possible move, I believe, which is bishop to d8, in which case queen to a6. Now, I didn't know this at first. I only really acknowledge this now that I'm looking at the actual line in front of me. And I wouldn't have really thought about this in game, realistically. Queen to a6. Yes, the queen can move. However, the queen doesn't really have any good moves. So let's just say they move the pawn up, whatever. They're going to be in a lot of trouble if I play bishop to b5, because it targets the king and their queen's in the way. So what's the best move for black anyway? So queen to a6. So their best move is knight to c3. Yeah. Okay, so essentially if they keep their queen there, let's just say they do a random move. If they keep their queen there, then essentially I can move my castle here, threaten their queen. Their queen can't move because of the king. And I'll be trading castle for their queen. And essentially, because there's the queen's, my queen's no longer pinning their queen to the king. If they move their queen out of the way, what's the best move then? Okay, knights to h4. Yeah, I wouldn't have seen that. Okay, interesting. A close second is just, oh, of course, sorry, the queen's being targeted by the bishop. Let's just say they move their queen to or they don't even really have any positions for the queen to begin with. It's not really safe any of the squares, except for perhaps maybe this square. Okay, in which case I could bring this rook into the game, and yeah, black's got a pretty hard time. But essentially the move that I missed, and I actually did end up losing this game, unfortunately, was right here when I did take their black pawn on a7, rather than putting them through a check and essentially pinning their queen. Yeah, and at this rate, it essentially just went downhill pretty quickly. I took their castle back. I had actually already looked at knight to c3 that it would fork my castle and my queen. In which case, my bishop was there, and I would move my castle to b8. And this is already losing for me, but in my mind I calculated it as a reasonably even trade. I'll lose my major piece for the minor piece. However, I just thought that at the time I thought that situation was pretty unavoidable. If I let me think, yeah, perhaps it wasn't though. Yeah, so in essence, what I did in the game was I completely traded off. I think I could have definitely done better there, because according to the artificial intelligence, I was still on top. So I guess I'll look into that line at a later point. So I just get through the game. So essentially I traded off. At this point, I'm down one pawn as well as a castle for in exchange for one of their knights. But yeah, I had that pawn just sitting there, and essentially they just pushed their pawn forwards, moved their king into the game. This is a recipe for disaster because I still haven't developed my pawns. If he swings his castle across, he could actually back rank checkmate me, as well as I have all my pieces aren't actually being protected. And if he moves his castle here, essentially he'll be pinning both my pieces, which is actually what ended up happening. Even though I tried to avoid it, it was essentially pretty hard to avoid. Because if I, at this rate here, I figured, oh, if I move my bishop out of the way, both my bishops will be safe from the castle. However, like I mentioned before, if I get it out of the way, it's actually mating. Well, it's a mate in 2, but in essence a mate in 1 because of that open back rank. So yeah, so I moved my bishop there to check him. I was just hoping he would make some sort of mistake. When he didn't, and there was no more checks to be had, I moved my bishop there. Essentially, at this point, I'd pretty much given up. I was just trying to play and dirty flag him, essentially. So I moved my king to f1. Yep, and at this point, it was basically just a tidy up. So my opponent played really well. I don't think they made any mistakes, any large mistakes. Essentially, there was an opportunity for me to get that checkmate. It was pretty hard to see, but it was possible. They did really well here to stop my king from really getting into the game. Had I played my king there, they would just move the pawn forwards. I'd be in check, and I can obtain that pawn because of that bishop. So they coordinate their pieces very nicely to stop my king from being able to take the pawn. I started to move very quickly for the dirty flag. Once they got their queen into the game, I pretty much was just hoping for a stalemate. But yeah, once they had the queen and the bishop lined up, I knew that I was pretty doomed. So yeah, that was the game. I ended up losing. My opponent played really well. Yeah, so hopefully in the future I'll look over this game and I'll see see where I could have improved my thought process at the time. And hopefully in the future, once I've learned a little bit more about chess, I'll look at this and sort of realize the inaccuracies of my thought process, or perhaps I wasn't thinking about the correct thing that I should be thinking about in those certain positions. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed and have a nice day.